So, are you recording?
I am recording, which says my bandwidth messed up just a little bit. So that's why there's a little bit of lag because I'm
Okay.
overpowering this poor little. I just wanted to. So I appreciate you working with me. Let's see. I wanted to get a meeting done, and I'm not on my regular my computer that I have my webcam set up on. I'm on my road. I'm on the road this week, but I still, it's just a heavy travel week, and I wanted to go ahead and get something done. You have great hours to where I could get hooked up with you. So I appreciate you working with me, and just forgive the appearance and the lagginess of the little video camera. I talked him out of letting me use his old laptop, and so it's kind of the B
Oh,
team, but we're getting it figured out.
yeah, not at all. So, I think I could record it on OBS if that would be better.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and record on OBS? This way I can make sure there's no errors. But I'm using a desktop recording application called Bandicam, and
Okay.
it should be capturing it. But like I said, I'm on his laptop, and it may not work. So I double did this for a presentation or I mean a talk that I did with. Let me take that off. There we go. Um, the names escape me right this second, but and it just worked great just in case there was an error. So
All right. Well, let me. Okay. Okay. Now I have it on Zoom and and should be good to go. Martin, you just say a couple words. Make
yep,
sure my level.
test, test, test. Thank you,
You're good.
thank you, thank you. Awesome.
All right.
So this will be the next thing is I got to learn XSplit, but that again is on my home computer. So, well, Tim, thank you for joining me and letting me practice the recordings with you. I actually hadn't gotten to do an interview with you in the first place. So, what is your background, for my curiosity?
Oh my goodness. Well, how far back do you want to go? That's the
Well,
problem.
we don't have to go all the way to childhood. Just, I guess, let me put it differently. What have you done, productively for like earning money for the last, I don't know, say 15 years, maybe.
Yeah, maybe 30 years or so. But
Okay.
so I'm uh, primarily involved in natural gas, transportation, trading, and marketing, both on the business side and then more recently in consulting and on the IT side.
Okay, that is awesome. Let me get this. I had, there we go. That's bothering me. No, that's not it either. It's one of these, a hotel room television there that I just had no noise in the background watching a basketball game, and now it's distracting me.
Yeah,
So, 30 years of natural gas industry.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, primarily on and off, but mostly on, and software included in there, and consulting.
and does that make you an engineer or?
No, I'm just a business guy and um, have a wide range of experience kind of up and down the value chain.
Okay, no, I hear that, like listening to some of your recommendations that I've heard you suggest. You've got a bevy of experience, and even to me, some entrepreneurial knowledge outside of just pure like corporate business. I mean, is that true?
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm always looking at new businesses. I've had a couple small businesses in the past, but really, I would like to try some other things and create something that I could do in like a retirement type role, but
Mm,
not even that really, more like a second or third career type role. Somewhere where I can do the things that I want to do, that I enjoy, and that I'm best positioned to do uh, from my strengths and gifts, and create value in a different way, if at all possible. One that really makes sense for me and for the people that I'm trying to serve.
yep, I mean, you've described pretty much the exact way that I feel as I go into what I consider uh, the later parts of my career as at some point I would really like to leave my current gig and do something exactly as you described. It's not to retire necessarily, but to retire from this to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually enjoying my work right now. I work for a great company and I have great people to work with. So I don't know that I would ditch it completely, but it might be that I'm just trying to trade up in value, if not economically, then in joy and pleasure of what I'm doing.
So you've done natural gas trading. Does that mean, what does that mean for my edification?
Yep. Well, that's a big long story as well. But back in the 90s, the pipelines, they used to supply all the gas to your local distribution company that supplies gas to your house or to the power plants. So they were integrated with the producers. They kind of had a stranglehold. There was some uneconomic business going on there. So the FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Committee, actually deregulated the pipelines to make them open access so that they could charge a fee to flow on the pipeline, but they couldn't sell gas to anybody. That left the world open for people who could connect the market to the supply. And that was kind of the birth of natural gas trading and marketing, providing customer service to both the producers and the consumers, being the middleman, but doing all the transportation on the pipelines, doing all the nominations, the communications, the logistics, and then the billing, and it's quite an exercise, and hedging your exposure. So it kind of became it's a monthly cycle, and then it became more of a daily cycle.
I think you might have just explained my gas bill to me.
Maybe. Scratching the surface.
Yeah. So, but I cut you off just because you were, in all honesty, blowing my mind for a second. I didn't realize that history of gas, but you didn't actually get to, so it goes into the daily thing, and I apologize, but.
Well, that's okay. Well, there's a couple of markets for natural gas, and a lot of it, domestic natural gas is tied to the Henry Hub in Louisiana. But it used to be that way because all the production was in the Gulf of Mexico. Over the years with the shale gas, the production has gone to closer to the markets. So gas for consumers has stayed, the prices have stayed low, and the supply has become more and more abundant because of the technology, to the point where the United States is actually exporting natural gas, liquefied natural gas, all across the globe. And I work for one of those companies in the past as well, LNG company. So they would bring LNG to the Gulf of Mexico, liquefy it. So that's a 600 to 1 compression of natural gas to natural gas liquid, and then load it on top of vessels, or loaded in vessels that were just like giant coolers, transport it across the globe to places that didn't have supply, but they had regasification terminals. So they would dump it into the cooler offshore, and then the company would regasify it and pump it into their distribution system, or at the power plant, or wherever they were going to consume it.
So now I'm curious, like I love our natural gas stuff because what you described, like winters have gotten less expensive, there's competition. You know, one of my bills that I am able to get the best negotiation with based on competition is my natural gas. So where do you stand on like fracking, and I just like in your perspective?
Yeah, well, I don't know of detrimental effects of fracking necessarily. I know of all the benefits of it. I can imagine there's costs of remediation, environmental quality, and kind of how do you dispose of the wastewater and waste that they use for fracking. But it's pretty tightly regulated, and I think they're incentivized to behave professionally, at least. But I am concerned somewhat because some of these companies go out of business, highly leveraged. That could cause some issues where they wouldn't have as much concern if they're not actually in business.
Well, and I was just more wondering like your experience because I've watched, I don't know, I watched the fracking movie and then I read stuff about it and I don't have enough knowledge to have an opinion except for as the consumer, and to me, I like the service I'm getting. So, uh,
Well,
the,
kind of hard to discern, and I'm sure there's some environmental trade-off, and we are all benefiting from the lower prices, that's for certain. And as well as in the power prices, because a lot of power generation at the margin is natural gas fueled.
mhm,
You also have choice in Texas, at least, where you can buy your power from. So there's competition. So prices are actually quite low.
mhm.
So all that money that would be sucked up by your utility bill or by the taxes on your utility bill, you can repurpose that to
Yep.
distributors and spend it on what you want to, as opposed to feeding the beast.
No, I didn't realize this was your expertise. So this is really good, a really great actual learning, just discussion for me because, like I said, I'm my favorite natural resource is our natural gas, just because of everything we've talked about so far, and from the consumer perspective, it's easy and competitive, and
Well, I love natural gas at the burner tip. We don't have a natural gas stove right now, but I would love to have one. I'd also like to
yeah,
have a grill out in the back, and we just have the fireplace and then the heat.
yep,
Power is pretty cheap, but it's pure fuel right there. Like, it's tangible. There's not a whole lot of loss on the delivery side. With electricity, you have a huge line loss and battery storage, and all that's secondary power anyway, because it's derived from some other source.
yep,
And, people who are running their electric cars, they don't consider the fact that there's some coal plant out there, or hydro plant, or a gas plant generating that electricity. Really, the wind electricity is an interesting case as well, because the wind is blowing in places where people don't live primarily. So sometimes the power goes negative, and they have to pay to distribute the power.
yep.
From those plants. And then because it's wind, you don't know when it's going to blow, and so you can't rely on it.
Well, and I mean, I thought, from what I've understood, the reading I've done is like GE's a big wind producer, and they had to get out of that. They're one of those that I think their turbines lost them a bunch of money. It's not a feasible business, and ultimately it's the same thing. You have to create these giant battery systems. There's no storage for it. I mean, and it's an eyesore, and it kills kills birds, and
Well, I think it's not viable without subsidies.
right.
So
Which,
you're taking money from other productive activities and directing it towards, uh, cronies, for lack of a better word.
yeah, well, the picking winners by virtue of government, and
Yeah.
I'm not a massive fan of that. So, well, were you Tragedy and Hope? I think I saw in your header file on Discord that you're a Tragedy and Hope member. So I assume that means that's where you came from. But is that your background with
Oh
Rich?
yeah, yeah. I've been a member ever since the Ultimate History lesson,
Mm,
and I've really benefited from the community over there. And I had actually thought that wouldn't it be nice if everyone could get together and converse like this.
hmm
So
hmm
I'm just thrilled that he was able to put that together, and that we're having the experience that we're having.
Yeah. And then I mean, so I've been how long? Probably about the same time where I think I joined the Tragedy and Hope community after the Ultimate History lesson. Might have been a little before. I can't honestly remember. I'd have to go back and look. Um, but I just felt compelled because I loved the work he was doing to provide resource support in any way that I could, And so I didn't use the community so much. I was more into just making sure I, donated some money every month.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, me
but
too.
this has been great because, I see some names that I saw, and it's so interesting to run into people like you that were on there that I didn't know who the audience was. And so
Yeah.
I should have realized that it had to be relatively smart people that could consume that type of information. And it's really refreshing. I can't say that I could be happier than having just happened to be part of this.
Yeah, I mean, having the opportunity to have just great conversations, with great people, and then, getting a chance to kind of interact directly with people who we've listened to for years
Yeah.
and be able to participate and contribute. It's fantastic.
And then you have children,
Yeah, I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old.
and what are they doing? Like obviously your 17-year-old is high school age, so what are they doing right this second?
Yeah, I got one in junior in school, in high school, and then the other one's in college. So yeah, they're pretty traditional.
And then anything that they're your college age student is a boy or girl?
Yeah, he's a boy. Yeah. I mean, he's a very like physical. He's dyslexic, so he has trouble reading. So he wrestles with it. But he's very like physically talented. Um, he's very personable. He's kind of banking on that, but he doesn't have. He knows that he needs to have a better vocabulary. That he has to acquire some more knowledge. That he has to be better spoken. So he's putting some time into reading and trying to improve his communication skills, alongside of playing video games and hanging out with his buddies and doing some work.
Yeah,
Doing
yeah.
some,
20-year-old male life. Well,
he's got a huge business going. So
good. So I find the dyslexia really interesting. I can totally relate. So, my 13-year-old is diagnosed with dyslexia also. How did he manage, how did your son manage through school with the, dyslexia? Because, like, it's not an issue in my eyes, but it does mean that he's got to approach things differently. And
yeah. Well, I mean, he went to public school and he was still ahead of the people that he was going to school with in the general classes, which was a disappointment because he really didn't learn much. It was just a holding pen. It's kind of everything that we feel bad about, and just didn't work out to send him to private school, and there was no way he was going to be homeschooled. So, number two, she got her into the private school for high school, and it has been probably 10 times better than the public school, but it has its own indoctrination set of things. But she has a pretty good like critical thinking, self-defense,
yeah.
and we spent a lot of time researching together, going through the brain model, and she likes that for the most part, which is fun for me. And so I have hopes for her intellectual self-defense. Let's put it that way.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, and we homeschooled just because, really, because of dyslexia. Like, I'm really impressed that you guys, were able to help him get through, and he out achieved, a lot of the other kids. We struggled because ours was one that he was falling behind on reading to where the school was making a big deal about it. And so they got him tested, they wanted us to give him drugs, and that just all led to really, they wanted to give him a diagnosis of dyslexia as well as ADD, and, that immediately in school leads to drugs, and I just couldn't put him through that, and I couldn't do it. So, we just had to find it a different way. But it wasn't I'm happy we did. It's been a great experience, but it was just out of desperation.
Well, I think it's kind of courageous that you guys were able to do that and took that step and were able to make it happen. You're going against all the enculturation and indoctrination and probably familial pressure and
Yeah, yeah.
every pressure I could imagine.
Yeah. you know, and I say it's been fantastic at this point, but it is an immense amount of work, and it does add just to both of our lives. It adds a lot of stress and different struggles. I can't be happier with like what we've come out with kids, but it's I won't lie, it is an all-encompassing challenge. So,
Sure,
uh,
sure it is.
well, I love the brain model. Like I'm a big user, and I've seen your history brain. I haven't had a chance to peruse it. Just you know, I've tried to engage with the class as much as possible while having kids and do all
Oh
this
yeah,
stuff. So
I mean, you're
um,
like,
it's very extensive though. So what you know, kind of tell me your path for getting into that track of the brain model and in particular history and
well, I mean, the history kind of goes back to um, the late 90s, and I think I've told this story before, but I was looking for ways to improve myself and kind of get ahead in life. And so I was um, kind of trying to learn about finances, world events, politics, and I kind of quickly came to the conclusion that it was rigged almost on every piece of it, and that everybody was in front of the line to get paid before me in every event. And then, oh, by the way, I took all the risk. So nobody was with me on the downside. It was only on the upside that everybody was with me. And so I kind of got an education for myself there. And then when 9/11 happened, I immediately said, there's something wrong here. This kind of thing doesn't look right. Those buildings exploded. They didn't fall down. They disappeared. Doesn't seem right. What's going on? So that was kind of stuck with me. And, you know, I was kind of not happy with that. And then like a year or so at some point later, I saw the video of Tower 7 and I was like, okay, well, for sure, that was not a fire. And if that was able to be achieved on that day after, then it was a pre-planned event, because you don't demolish a building in 12 hours, set it up and demolish it in 12 hours. Like it doesn't, there's just absolutely no way. So, you know, and then it kind of became an investigation of what are these people capable of? And then it became a realization of they're capable of anything. And a lot of things that you think about and know about in one way are not the way they seem. And there's no regard for human life whatsoever at that level. It's just something else. So it's very immoral and kind of evil. And so that those things kind of prompted me to begin a further investigation and to try to learn. And I felt like I didn't know my own history. I didn't know the history of like where I lived, where I came from, or I don't know that you can know like who you are until you know some of those things. And so I kind of got caught up in the Kennedy assassination for a while. And that was my kind of Mae Brussel thing. And so I bought all of her CDs. And I was like, well, if I'm going to listen to these, I'm going to plug it all into the brain model. And like the first set of her tapes, so she was a housewife in the 60s, and she was in California, and she took a look at the assassination and she said, okay, there's just no way that happened the way they said it did. So she bought the 25 volumes of the Warren Commission testimony, and then she spent 2 years cross-referencing it. And she pretty much had figured out what happened after she had done all that work. And then she spent 25 years telling people about it, and then investigating fascism in America. And yeah, I mean, she was a little blind to Israel, and she got a little kooky on some of her stuff later and after the 80s or so, or into the 80s. And then she died, like I think she was 66 of a fast-acting cancer. They assassinated her daughter, and they spied on her. So it was, she had a relationship with Jim Garrison. She was a pretty like spunky and fascinating woman. And so that's kind of, I learned so many things about current history of the 60s because she was telling it in real time as it occurred. She was reading like 10 newspapers a day and just synthesizing it all. And for a week, she would read the newspapers and then she'd do an hour cassette tape on 2 sides and then mail it out. So, I mean, I just gobbled that stuff up. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you still have all those?
Oh yeah, I still have all the CDs.
Dang,
And burned all the files up on my computer.
so you have burned them all. So that's one. I'll have to see if we can't talk into eventually. I've never listened to them, but that sounds amazing. Like now I'm trying to remember everything you said because that was an amazing little just journey through. So you actually were studying like trying to discover real history before 9/11 happened.
Yeah, and then it was a little bit before, and then definitely afterwards.
So, were you a voter prior to 9/11?
Not too much. I mean, I've voted like make every third election or something like that.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I didn't-
No. I
I
mean,
didn't really vote.
go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't vote for the Bushes or the Obamas. And then I voted against Hillary last election just because I couldn't take it.
Yeah, I didn't actually vote against her, but I was rooting against her. Like I have to admit, I voted with my dollar. I made like a $50 donation to Trump campaign, and because I wasn't gonna vote, but I'd give a little money, and I can't say that I've only regretted it because I get Trump email and Trump mail and shit like that. So.
Well, I mean, as a puppet show, it's fun, and it's like a Punch and Judy show.
Yeah.
There's some entertainment value, and there was a lot of entertainment value for me and him just kicking people in the nuts. I kind of like that. So that was fun, but I'd never expected that anything would ever change because foreign policy is locked up. Maybe has like a 0.5% wiggle room on the domestic policy, but then you got Congress locked up, which I think I prefer gridlock to party rule anyway. So
no, this might be the greatest thing that's happened is the gridlock here recently. So yeah,
and I'm not a believer in it, and I'm insulted by it. I'm insulted by mainstream media.
Yeah,
Told I shouldn't be insulted, that I should just live at a higher level, and I can't help myself sometimes.
Well, for those of us that have, you did an impressive work of discovering history well. Like I got through 9/11, and I remember where I was on the road for my company at the time, and we were at like it was a corporate training to where the small team that we were on was all in different meeting rooms. Somebody came in and turned on the TV, and there was the first tower going down. And it was just so shocking because, I think we saw the plane hit, and then the first tower went down, and it just like you said, it looked like a demolition even that day.
Yeah.
And I still didn't put all of it together, and
Well, it seemed like a sob to me on that day because every news station had the same information, the same set of words they were using, and it just felt contrived. Like, how do they get all those good shots? Like, how are they in place?
Perfect shots all the time, different panoramic views. Yeah.
And okay, it's New York City, so they have people there, but just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then you throw the Pentagon on top of that. It's like, show me the friggin' plane, right? Where's the plane? The aluminum nose cone plane doesn't do that. I'm sorry, I can't buy that.
Well, I mean, we could just look at historical, building collapses and burns, and then historical plane crashes, and there's always there's just no debris. I mean, like you said, an aluminum nose cone that doesn't just disintegrate.
Well, if you think about the mass of those World Trade Center towers, how much mass was in the concrete and steel in that building, and the fact that it was built from the bottom up to overhold its weight, that there's no pancaking. That's impossible. And then you look at the footprint of the collapse, of the demolition, and there's no mass. It's all gone. Where did the
Yeah.
mass go? There's no steel. There's no concrete.
Pulverized to just what was molten left in the bottom, man.
It's almost like they reduced it to the steel, and everything else disappeared. So that's not a fire and a physical, like, kinetic collapse. It's not possible. So the fact that people still believe that, and that they were able to psyop the world in that big of a fashion is very, very frightening.
Yep. Well,
It's very frightening for everyone's future.
we've had a continuous American intervention or, undeclared war ever since. So the war machine's been strong.
Yes, that and loss of civil liberties and more control, more rules, laws, violations, and just creeping technocracy. So, yeah, I try not to like get myself wound up, but it can be a wind up.
No, I understand. I can get worked up over it. What I hate to admit is I had some tax problems where I was young and dumb, but what I found out was, there's no due process. Like, they'll take money and like destroy your family without any warning. So that got me down the path of starting to pay attention to, really taxation as theft. And then the Obama deception came out, and somebody, was a comedian that was talking about it and introduced that to me, and I watched that, and that's what blew my mind. Just because everything that I had seen and hadn't crystallized, that was the one movie that for me Alex Jones got right.
So,
And
so what was it about the movie? Because I don't think I saw that.
he just explained, if you slowed down and you looked, that now it's been more than 12 years ago or whatever, because he came out a little before Obama was elected. But that ultimately the money was, I mean, that the policies would be the same, and he did a great job of at that point pointing out, for those of us that were me, so for me, who was still kind of just thinking Republican and Democrat, that the machine was the same. And it was just his first thing to say, okay, you're getting this Democratic black president, but the policies will be the same as Bush. There's not going to be any difference. And then he was completely right. For all practical purposes, there were some shifts of a few policies, but essentially, like you said, Israel, warmongering, the drone king. It
In the
was,
state, lack of civil liberties, all
yeah,
that stuff.
yep. None of it got. I mean, it was exactly right. And then the thing that he pointed out to me that I did not realize was he was supported. He pointed out the bankers that supported him, and so then you could just see where he was the most well-funded presidential candidate at that point ever. And so once it just put me to looking, and then I got to looking at the 9/11 tapes and the Building 7. I was another one that didn't even realize Building 7 fell until whatever year that was that he got elected. And so I had voted for Clinton the first year, and then maybe a Bush at one point, maybe after the second term of Bush. I was military guy and all. I got suckered into it, and then I haven't voted since. So
Yeah,
uh,
we don't know what we don't know until we know it, right?
yep. And I look back and I just laugh, but it's really impressive when you were able to start looking at that history early. It took a couple of drastic events for me to start to realize, but
Well, I was kind of alone in my research and my thoughts, and my wife is kind of aligned with all of this. And I really started reading, like looking for sources of information that I thought were quality. And I liked Ron Paul, and I got reading Lou Rockwell every day. And then I actually subscribed to Gary North for a long time. And I would just go through articles that made sense to me and find the author and then trace it back to their site, their content, see if they had other authors that made sense to them, and kind of build out a network of viable information. And it's changed over time, but I've just always like tried to increase the quality of the things that I'm consuming. And I might like read a website for 5 years and then find out that I've been able to upgrade the quality of that information, and I'm able to move on.
Yep.
And I've done some of that, and I find it interesting. And now I kind of go back, and the more I learn, the better I get at discerning things. Like a Zero Hedge is like a news site, and I think increasingly that the content has become more of a psyop, and
Right.
and I think it always has been, but it did have some alternative, like, interesting articles to suck you in, but it became like a little bit of an echo chamber of its own, and it had a slant, and they never get to the core of the matter.
Right.
Never really get to the core of the force, fraud, coercion, and corruption.
Yep. No, they point out just enough that it feels like they're giving no news, but you're exactly right. They've been doing it a long time to where
Yeah, they're drip feeding, right?
Yeah.
A little there. Well, I'm interested. We got this guy's attention. We can suck him into some other things. And the whole, I have a strong interest in the whole psychological warfare business, relating to World War II and the OSS and Henry Luce and C.D. Jackson and Edward Bernays. And, they really, after, I think, World War I, when Bernays saw the value of the propaganda, they had applied it to the enemy or the other side of the war, and then they realized how powerful it was, and they just turned the mirror inwards, reflected it back.
Reflected it, yep.
Yeah, how do we milk these people for everything they're worth?
Right. And so comes the creeping technocracy, and we've really, the American people, to pluralize it, are definitely some pretty good tax slaves. So I mean,
like a 50%, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it just
I'm just 50% slave.
Yeah, and I sit like I was at another corporate dinner tonight, and so there's some of us that are a little older in there. There's some good maturity, good exercise. It's a big corporation, so it's probably similar to the mix that you experience, but there's these young kids that are really smart. I really appreciate their brains, their drive, their talent to be where they are, marketing. But they were talking about watching this Netflix show that I'd never heard of, and it's about global warming in essence. And they just went off to where, I didn't have the energy to even go into questioning and try to raise issues with it, because we're at a dinner table, and I just didn't have it. But I was horrified to listen to that they really, really seem to believe that the world will end in their lifetime if they don't if they don't restrict themselves and do all these things that is being suggested on these shows. And
yeah, well, it's interesting when you find them parroting CNN word for word.
Yeah.
And, my whole family, extended family, is all about that, so it's very difficult to spend any time with them.
Oh no, and I don't know, it just alarmed me, because I'm like, these are actually the kids, and hopefully some of them will grow out of it, but I don't know. Well, anyways, I don't want to get sidetracked. It was just on my mind. I needed to express it, and something you said brought it out of me. So
I can sympathize with that for sure.
Well, I'm just curious. So, with your research and listening to all those tapes from the Kennedy assassination, what was her, hypothesis or her conclusion, and who do you think done it?
Well, I think science kind of pointed to Frank Sturgis and E. Howard Hunt and an assassination team Operation 40 team.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people were rewarded with jobs in the future. And it was the kind of the Defense Industry Security Commission. They had Walter Dornberg, who was a paperclip Nazi, ran Bell Helicopter, and Haynes, Ruth, and I forgot what the guy Payne's name was. They were like his host in Dallas, and they were Oswald's host in Dallas. And then when you go to the site and you go to the 6th floor of the book depository, you can plainly see that that's the worst place to set up to take a shot, because the car's going at a downward angle. And then when you walk down on the plaza, you're like, okay, you could have shot from the railroad bridge, from the grassy knoll, from anywhere in front where the car's coming at you. And the fact that the car stopped tells you that it was just a free fire.
Yeah.
kill.
Well, the perfect hesitation after, perfect hesitation to where you have the triangulated shooters. So,
Yeah. I don't think Oswald was a shooter because of his body language and his statements, and the fact that they saw him downstairs having a Coke right after the assassination.
yep. Well, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I mean, if you look at Oswald's history of, well, okay, he was a Marine, he was fluent in Russian. Okay, how do you get that? Then he so-called defected to the Soviet Union on a diplomatic airplane through Finland and had passage all the way through. Worked at the Minsk radio factory when Francis Gary Powers was shot down in the U-2 plane, and he married a Russian oligarch's general's daughter and brought her back to the United States and got a free pass to come back in, and that was funded by somebody, and they got him a job in New Orleans, and he had this cover job of the Free Cuba Foundation in New Orleans. I mean, he's obviously a made man actor.
Yeah.
And he was set up to be the patsy, and so they whacked him when it turned out that they couldn't whack him at the movie theater. They had one of their mob guys whack him.
Yep. Well, I mean, some of the stuff I've read, also, now I can't remember his name. It's not going to come to me right this second, but the guy that killed Che Guevara was also one of the kill teams that was there. I mean, I think they had, like you said, it was the 40 team. There were several kill teams built out across, as far as what I've read, and it seems credible to me from, whether Fletcher Prouty or I can't remember the researcher that I really like. One of the ones from Tragedy and Hope that I picked up his book, but I still am pretty strong on, I feel like definitely CIA involvement, and
Well, George Bush was there, right? He was there.
Bush, yeah.
He claimed that he was in Tyler, but you can see a picture of him in Dealey Plaza.
Yeah.
And if you read the history of George H.W.
He got
Bush,
rewarded ultimately, presidency one day. So.
head of the CIA and presidency, and the Hinckley just so happened to be connected to the Bush family, and
Yeah.
tried to assassinate Reagan. Probably the only thing that saved him was that they kept him at the Naval Hospital and took him to the local hospital. Otherwise, he would just not have made it. Would have been too bad.
Yep. Or they would have put him in a room that was locked away and to just let him die. I mean, one of those sealed places because they were watching him. So.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, disturbing, disgusting at the same time, and it's just so contrary to everything that you were ever indoctrinated to believe.
I think what I find interesting is, like, I do enjoy the Game of Thrones because I feel like it, in its own gory way, is so much representation of true power players, like just the evil banality of those who love power.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult, and I think all we can do is try to be examples in the world, if at all possible, and spread the word a little bit where we can. and try to find solutions that we can implement and help other people implement.
Yep, and just I think it's such a strong reason to just ignore all that stuff. Like I got suckered into hating Hillary too, because that's what it was, is something we brought up earlier. My last little statement is, doing your research, the research I've done on the Clintons that's just such a mob family of vicious, murdering, power hungry people.
Yes.
I just couldn't help but root against her, and
How corrupt are they? And then how come she's not in jail with the
Yeah.
email server? And, there's no evidence of Trump doing anything with Russia, but they have all of her emails. And
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
State Department emails. And oh, by the way, they sold Russia the uranium.
Yes.
So they must not be that evil, right?
Right. And always, hey, that's gonna get me off on my side, right? But ultimately, that's just to be ignored. I'm just saying, I have such a hate on for the Clintons. I was so,
Well, it's kind of fun to do the body count and then the MENA investigation.
yeah,
And what was really fun for me and illuminating was sucking out all the donators to the Clinton Foundation from their website and putting it in the brain model and then cross-referencing with everybody.
that's something you should. I'd love it if you would share to sometime just so we can look at it.
I really,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I mean, it's just a map of corruption.
Crap. Yeah.
Just a map.
Just take the picture, the screen capture to share out. I have a.
There's so many that I just can't get it on one screen capture.
Oh,
They're $25 million down to $500.
yeah. I actually have a site in, so what we do, I sell medical equipment, so we go show off our equipment at certain places. At a University of Arkansas Medical Center has one of my pieces of equipment, as well as a place called Carti. It's Central Arkansas radiation therapy something.
Yeah.
And so we go and we stay overnight. But if you bring up the Clintons, I mean, there's Clinton stuff everywhere around there. But they're just thought of as crooks and criminals by everyone in Little Rock.
Well, we went to visit University of Arkansas. So we were probably 30 miles from Mena, and we were back it was very strange up in the mountains up there.
Yeah.
There were no people. It was way, way, way out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I was watching for the aliens to come down and abduct us.
Yeah, some aliens.
And we stayed at a hotel in Fayetteville. And right down the street, I went for a jog. I like to do a jog to kind of see the town, do like a 4-mile loop. And that allows me to see a lot of different things that I wouldn't see, kind of get a feel for the land in any city that I visit. And I jogged past the Rose Law Firm, and I'm like, oh, yeah, we are in Arkansas.
Nice. Yes. That's well. We whenever I take clients there, we stay at a hotel right near the Clinton Library. So, it's funny coming out of like Georgia. I always invite them to go see the Clinton Library. No one ever takes me out, but.
Well, Georgia, an interesting place. Like I lived in Atlanta for a while when I got out of college, and they have pretty high taxes, what I could tell, and seems very liberal for a southern state.
Well, it's sort of the perfect red state. It's a big red state with a big chewy blue spot in the middle.
Yeah.
So, it's not necessarily great on like I'm a gun nut, and so to me it's good property rights, good gun rights. But yes, bad taxes, and they do have a tendency to be dangerous because of the Atlanta, politics. But you get outside of it, and like I've got a hunting lease, and the old farmer down there, he'll run the sheriff off in a heartbeat. Like he tells us to go hunt deer at night with the light because he's like, fuck those guys.
So, yeah, I'd love to come over there and do some hunting with you.
Yeah.
I do a little hunting out here in Texas, and the gun laws are fairly decent here, and for some armed to the teeth. So I love that.
Yeah, yeah. No, we definitely we get through this first session. We'll just have to plan it out. We get into heavy hunting right around in the holiday season. So here the prime deer season is that November December months, and just take a weekend. And I've got it's just a little try bring blankets and do air mattresses. I've got a little trailer that'll sleep like 6 people or whatever,
Yeah,
and we just hang out and talk shit and go shoot things, and
good life.
it's a good time, man.
That's a good life.
um
We have a guy, our guy is in Centerville, which is halfway between here and Dallas, and he's an old aerospace engineer who retired, bought some property, and he runs a hog hunting ranch. And yeah, they have deer, and he has a like an 2 acres with a cabin on it, and then 110 acres fenced.
oh yeah.
So he has a gun range in the back of the cabin. He has
That's
a
nice.
covered portico where we can clean the hogs or deer, whatever you shoot.
Yep.
We do skeet shooting. We do like a stalk hunt or a blind hunt, and yeah. So it's just total all hands on deck freedom. And he wanted to meet me and my son uh, for lunch before we went hunting the one time. So we met him in the neighboring town. He shows up and he's got his boots on and his hat, and he's got a vest on, and he's got his 45 under his vest. And I'm like, this is the way it should be.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, that's what's fun in the rural areas, because like, yes, Georgia, Atlanta is very liberal, but you get out there, you have to have a license to open carry in Georgia. But once you get out in the boonies, like especially that time of year, just everybody is just flat out on the hip. It's the 45 on the hip, and I love it because yes, it's very but like the cops are respectful down there, especially with the old farmers. They just don't mess with them, and it's just understood. These are people that still believe they own their own property, and no one's gonna
Yeah.
mess with them.
They own themselves.
Yep. And they
Yeah.
wouldn't even think of themselves like libertarian. They're just like, this has been the family for longer than you've been around here, boy, and this is my land.
That's right. They're just people.
Yeah. Well,
Good stuff.
I really appreciate all this. Is there, is there anything you'd like to say about the autonomy course? Tim?
Well, not much more than what we've already said, really, that it's a great opportunity to converse and reach out to like-minded people. And there's a lot of diversity in the class, which I find very entertaining and interesting. A lot of eclectic opinions and beliefs, and there's nothing really out of bounds, which is very nice.
Yep.
Part is we all kind of come from the same background as far as freedom goes, and the non-aggression principle, and respecting others, and property rights, and having great conversations, and just the ability to talk through some of the concepts and get different perspectives that make sense. I've learned a tremendous amount. Give me a lot of ideas on how I want to go forward with
Yeah.
my other business ventures and other skills that I want to pursue. And I just appreciate the opportunity to share that with other people and go through this experience with you and the rest of the crew.
Yep. I mean, I totally second that. It's been awesome, and the fun is we can disagree. Like I've disagreed a couple times with some people, but we can do it and still, like you said, it's ultimately respectful, and we can have our discussion, and maybe we figure it out, maybe we don't. There's no real negative, and it's been great.
Bring your evidence, and then we can agree or disagree.
Yep.
Good stuff. Well, thank you for reaching out, Martin. It's nice to spend the time with you.
Yeah, no, and I thank you for putting up with my, weak camera and everything. We'll see if one of the recordings came out, but this was great. I really enjoyed it. So thank you, Tim, and hopefully we'll do it again.
All right, thanks a lot,
We'll
Martin.
keep
We'll see you.
chatting, and I definitely, it's most fun when we get somebody out there that it's just we go hang out and get somebody new in the mix and go hopefully get a deer, mostly just
Oh yeah,
hang out and do, outdoor stuff. So,
that's right. Yeah, do man stuff.
Yep. Yep. All right, man. Well, thank you, Tim.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye bye.